A new study shows that the rate of peanut allergies in young children has dropped sharply in recent years.
Health experts say that it's thanks to guidelines that now encourage parents to introduce their kids to peanuts from an early age rather than avoiding them. The New York Times writes, for decades, as food allergy rates climbed, experts recommended that parents avoid exposing their infants to common allergens, but a landmark trial in 2015 found that feeding peanuts to babies could cut their chances of developing an allergy by over 80%.
Now, 2 years after that trial, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases formally recommended the new guidelines of what it calls early introduction. The new study, published earlier this week in the medical journal Pediatrics, found that food allergy rates among children under the age of 3 have fallen by 36% after those guidelines were put in place. That includes a 43% drop in peanut allergies.
The news is being celebrated in the medical world as it's estimated that around 40,000 children have avoided peanut allergies in the past decade thanks to the new guidelines. But some are upset and even outraged since there's now evidence that the old guidance was wrong. Former Fox News columnist Steve Malloy writes on X, the junk science-fueled American Academy of Pediatrics has harmed an entire generation of children with its nutty advice. And attorney Laura Powell says, well, how many children have needlessly died due to peanut allergies? Doctors' arrogance has a body count. They need to demonstrate a lot of humility if they want to regain trust.
However, others argue that this new development is a good example of the scientific method working the way that it should. Organic chemist Simon May Schling says, quote, this shows what science looks like when it works. You observe, you experiment, you adapt, and yes, you admit when you're wrong. He continues, quote, let scientists be scientists. Let evidence guide action, and let's stop pushing progress just because it's uncomfortable. Because next time, it won't just be peanuts, it might be something far bigger. Listen, as a mom of a kid who had a peanut allergy back in the day.
I wanted to wait to talk to you about this.
Well, I'm glad you held this story for me because I really feel strongly about this. I do believe that doctors and
She does
scientists,
have peanut allergy, is that what you said?
She does, but it went away. She had one for like 1 to 6 months.
Okay.
And just a small one. Like, we're not talking about like needing an EpiPen. We're talking about like maybe need some Benadryl.
Okay.
But it was just like maybe a little itchy. So I would just try some lotion. I used that last resort. So we couldn't figure it out. She just would turn red and itchy. And then next thing you know, we went to our doctor who actually followed these guidelines and was like, sit in the office while we can monitor you. It's like a whole 8-hour process. So it took up the whole day, but we're going to give her spoonfuls of peanut butter every hour and monitor. A bigger spoonful every hour. So I'm just like, oh gosh. So I'm like, is she going to suffer or whatever? And I didn't know that this was this 2015 study that they were doing intentionally. But by that, we learned that she actually doesn't, she kind of was outgrowing the allergy. So they tried it the first time when she was like 3 months, tried it again when she was 6 months, tried it again when she was a year. And we realized that it wasn't affecting her at all, even though we had done the back test where they actually, insert the allergens on your back. And then if you have a bump or a hive, that shows you if the kid's allergic. So I actually was frustrated that doctors were just skipping over this knowledge of having this. That was the biggest part to me, that in 2015, this research came out and some doctors were adamantly saying, no, we still think we can avoid testing peanuts or introducing them early because we think that's the better way to go, when there was research showing that this wasn't the right way. I don't blame anybody before 2015 when there wasn't scientific hard facts that were studied detailed and heavily for not introducing peanuts earlier. Like, I think some of the conversation around conservatives that are frustrated that people weren't introducing this like in 2010 or 2000 is a little insane, because the whole point of science is to try it over and over again. You keep testing until you have a solid study like the one that came out in 2015 that shows you, yes, it's fine to introduce these allergies to kids early. It will help them get over it quicker, because that was actually Kinsley's experience. So I think, like, why are we beating up on doctors? Like, the whole point, kind of like
I'm not beating up on doctors. It's beating up on government health experts confidently asserting something we now know not to be true.
They were going off the information they had at the time.
Well, right, but it comes from a place of overprotectiveness that is too present, I would say, in our policies. Not even our hard and fast policies, but just our entire cultural milieu. On peanuts specifically, I know just from my mother was a nursery school teacher, and just the like, no peanuts anywhere. Like, that was again, not the schools, right? That's just where everyone was for so long, that peanuts were treated like a biohazard. Like, you couldn't bring them in even if your kid was fine with them in case, because what if another kid touches them? They die immediately. It was a level of fear for a long time that was that has had harmful effects, because we now know we'd be more likely to overcome them if there's a introduction. And I think that speaks to at Reason Magazine, where I write, I work with a woman named Lenore Skenazy, who is known as America's worst mom, because she's famous for allowing her kids. She started a whole cultural movement. She let her young child walk to the New York subway station by himself in order to learn self-resourcefulness.
What's young?
I don't know what the exact age was, but it speaks to the fact that we're getting older now, so maybe it's even our grandparents' generation, our parents' and grandparents' generation had much less adult supervision at young ages,
yes,
at a time where there was actually much more crime. The fear of like strangers and kidnappings and all that is so overblown relative to the danger to kids. There's a danger in not giving kids enough unstructured free time and playtime, not letting them explore, not letting them develop, not letting them trip and skin their knees and learn how to play on the jungle gym. It had to be supervised all the time because of this utterly disproportionate fear of kidnapping and strangers and all of that. This is a little different than that, but I think it comes from the same protective ethos, the helicopter parenting mindset that is supported by law, because you're not allowed to let your kid go to the playground or walk to school. Or in so many municipalities, it's criminalized until like adulthood. They arrest parents. They arrest a lot of parents of color. They send CPS after you for leaving your kids to your own devices for some of the day, even though that's natural and healthy and is how most humans were raised, at times where there were greater dangers. So I had that in the back of my mind as I was reading this information.
I get
that makes sense.
No, I get the connection of, you think that the federal government is helicoptering this whole situation with the peanuts, and they were being overly cautious. But at the same time,
an abundance of caution.
Right, but my question would be, as conservatives, how can they say that is overly cautious and have an attitude about it, but then also when President Trump is overly cautious regarding Tylenol and moms with stuff that's not even researched thoroughly as it needs to be to connect the dots fully. He's basing off few studies, not the majority of studies, telling women don't take Tylenol very adamantly, even though the rest of his team wasn't saying the same thing. But the president went on TV and was like, I would stay away from it totally, So how could that's over? That's the federal.
Unless you need it.
Yeah, he had very strong words. I remember that press conference. I cannot quote him right this second, but he had strong words that many articles were written about how he presented it. It's not as much of a crisis as he made it seem. He is part of the federal government. He said that out of his own mouth. So it's like, do you want somebody because then there were a ton of articles about how protective he's being, and how women should know this information and people should have an abundance of caution. So do you want the abundance of caution as a conservative, or do you not? Because if you wanted the abundance of caution, you got to take it with the peanuts too.
All right, I guess that's a fair point. I don't want an abundance of caution. I think COVID, which we haven't discussed yet, is the clearest example of the abundance of caution mindset being itself deeply harmful. This is something David Zweig, a journalist we've had on Rising a number of times, he actually has a book out called An Abundance of Caution. We had him on to talk about it. Wow. And he talked about the peanut case, I believe, in the book, or he's talked about it since, and how that applies to COVID, to masking policies in particular, to school closures, to social distancing. Were done in an abundance of caution, but also had, and we're seeing, the lingering horrible, catastrophic effects on the social behaviors of young people because, we want to be very careful, and being careful is not always being smart.
So maybe it's a case-by-case situation.
Still to come, Elon Musk and Bernie Sanders seem to be in agreement when it comes to the impact of AI on jobs. We'll be back with that right after this.